Lord.
So picture this. Rome, 1998. Your pastor, myself, 20 years younger than I am now. I was the vice rector of the largest seminary in Rome. I had no gray hair yet. And it was a beautiful job, a very demanding job, doing that type of work. However, there's this one occasion, this snapshot that I want to share with all of you, was March 19th, 1998, the Feast of St. Joseph, and we were having a very special guest come to the seminary, Pope John Paul II. He was coming to pray with us, have lunch with us, a little visit. And this is kind of the end of my term as the vice rector. It's kind of like the icing on the cake to have the Pope come over the house. So I had all of the seminarians wash every single window in the seminary, scrub every floor. We were waiting for this big guest to arrive. And it was a very enjoyable preparation that we were doing. But there was one part of the task that I really didn't enjoy. Because all the other stuff was actually kind of fun. I got to work with the Vatican security detail, and we had to make sure that the Pope would be safe in every angle. If a sniper tried to attack or something, we'd have that covered. Finding out what the Pope actually likes to eat and to drink. I never knew it, but Pope John Paul II loved peach iced tea. So if you're ever on Jeopardy or some game show and they ask you, you'll know it's peach iced tea that he liked. But the part of the task that I didn't like, and it reminds me of today's gospel, is that I had to set up the main table in the dining room. I had to make these white little cards, and I had to sit everyone appropriately. So the Pope would be in the middle, the Secretary of State would be to his right, the rector of the seminary would be here, and then every cardinal and bishop and archbishop and monsignor would all lined up in the correct order, who's first, who's second, and various importance. And I have to say I was annoyed by that, because I thought, you know, these bishops and these cardinals, like, they don't get the gospel. Just like James and John, like we just heard, they don't get the message of Jesus. He's talking about service and dying and all this stuff. And they're saying, Lord, when you come into your glory, we want to be first, we want to be second, we want to be on your right, we want to be on your left. And you say to yourself, what's wrong with these apostles? Like, why don't they get it? And I was saying the same thing in myself, these cardinals and the bishops, like, why don't they get it? Why can't they just sit like with everyone else? Why do there have to be a pecking order? But we got everything ready. Everything was set. The Pope came up to the front door. We had all the seminarians lined up there. But lo and behold, there were two other Vatican officials who had not RSVP'd, but who decided to come along. So the rector of the seminary grabbed me as the Pope was coming in, and he says, you have to make quickly 2 new name cards, and then you have to go to the dining room, get other settings, but make sure you place it all in the right order. And I was so annoyed. Here I was, missing the opportunity, you know, to chit-chat with the bishop or the Pope in the lobby, and here I have to make sure that this archbishop is more important than this cardinal, and I'm getting all judgmental in my head, but I do it, and I don't get to sit at the table. Even though I'm the vice rector, the number 2 guy in the seminary, I had to make sure everything was served, everything worked very well. So that's the first part, the snapshot of that picture. Obviously the gospel goes further, and so does my story. After the Pope had a lovely lunch, we did everything. We, as our custom was in the seminary, we would walk from the dining room, which would be like kind of where the gym is now. We'd all walk into our chapel. And the chapel is very similar, actually, to our church. It's kind of a church in the round. And all 350, 360 seminarians and priests, we'd all come in, we'd kneel down, we'd say our prayers, and then you go on with the rest of your day. But because the Pope was with us, he was going to come and kneel in the back row where Paul is there in the back, and kneel there as well with us. And then at my signal, I would rap on the pew twice. All of the seminarians would get up, and then they would all stand here in the sanctuary so we could get a group photo with the Pope. We practiced this for 3 days. I had everyone in the chapel. I said, this has to go off perfectly. And you know you're standing here or there. And the way I had it organized is that at the very end, the Pope would be right down here, the rector of the seminary would be here, and I would be here, the proud vice rector. This is my moment to be that close to the Pope. Had it all organized. The Pope comes in. I give the signal. Everyone goes to their places. The Pope gets up, he's walking down, I'm making sure that everyone's there, and I go to where my spot is, and there's this priest who decided to take my spot. I was so angry, I was so annoyed, I had to go stand all the way over here in the corner, and then put on my fake smile, and I wanted to kill him, but I decided not to do that. The next day we did send him out to outer Mongolia and never been heard of since. But anyway, and as I was standing there in the corner and I was so annoyed, I thought to myself, Stephen, like, you don't get the gospel. You're complaining about James and John, you're complaining about these cardinals and bishops, and you're just as bad. What Jesus was saying in the gospel, as James and John were talking about glory, Jesus says it's not about glory. Christianity is about service. I have come to serve and not to be served. I'm like, kind of, what's wrong with you? Why don't you get this message? And I want us to keep that in mind, because the other thing about this weekend is that this weekend is known as Mission Sunday. So at the end of Mass, we'll have our boxes in the lobby. We'll have our second collection envelopes. We'll put it in there. We'll be saying prayers for these missionaries throughout the world, and we're supporting them. And that's all good and true. But I think sometimes when we think of the missionaries as being those who are out there in foreign lands, we forget the reality that we, all of us, Christians, by virtue of our baptism, we are called to be missionaries. We're called to be missionaries in our homes, in our places of work, in our neighborhoods, in our parish. Each one of us has this call to be a Christian missionary. And my hope and prayer is that for all of us will recognize that that call to be a missionary is a call to service, to be of service to others in very humble and simple ways, and not to look for the glory or look for the acclaim. Because when I look back at that snapshot from 30 years ago or 20 years ago, I see myself as a 30-year-old, I realize that the first part of the day, I did a good job. I served and I wasn't looking for it. But then there's that second part where that kind of selfishness kind of kicks in. And the main idea I wanted to leave with all of you for this week is that, we often think of the world in terms of black and white, or rich and poor, or liberal and conservative, or men and women. We think of all these binary things, and they're all logical divisions that exist in our world. But I think there's one big division that exists, and that there are some of us who really try to lead selfless lives. And then there are others among us, myself included, sadly many times, that we live selfish lives. And I think what Jesus is trying to get across in today's gospel about being of service, being these missionaries of service, is he's calling our attention to the fact that there's always going to be that struggle, always that battle inside of us. And my prayer is that for all of us this week and going forward, whenever we have that battle, that tug of war, between that option between being selfless or being selfish, that we'll remember this homily, we'll remember this gospel, and we'll remember that truly be a Christian, to truly understand the mission of Jesus, is to aim for that selfless, humble, quiet Christian service. And that service, like charity, begins at home. That humble service really begins in our places of work, begins in all those little areas where we are day in and day out. So the question I want to leave with all of us and this includes all of us in this church today, is let us ask ourselves, Lord, how can I be of better service? How can I be truly more of Christian who seeks to serve and not to be served? Amen.